From the Cronkite studios in downtown Phoenix, this is Cronkite News.
Good evening and welcome to this special edition of Cronkite News on Arizona PBS. I'm Ethan Schmidt. Tonight, we take a look at some of our top consumer stories, from the future of virtual field trips to how making pottery is sacred to many Native American tribes.
How soon will smart cities be a reality, and who will lead the way? Arizona officials joined others at a congressional forum in Washington today to try to answer those questions. Cronkite News reporter Julian Parras is live in our Washington bureau with more on that story. Julian?
Self-driving cars, community-wide wireless access, all visions of the smart city of the future. But there are several steps that have to be taken before we get to that vision. Or in the case of one college campus, not steps exactly. Northern Arizona University, for example, is testing rolling robots that deliver food on campus to make student life a little easier.
Hello, here's your delivery.
NAU and Arizona State University were both represented today at Smart Campuses 101, a briefing in Washington where experts talked about the importance of promoting technology on college campuses and how that can be a stepping stone to smart cities.
How do we make living in a particular community as well as on a university campus a good thing for not only the students and the staff, but for the citizens that also benefit from the presence of our institutions?
Rolling robots aren't the only technology being tried out on college campuses. Speakers at the event talked about clean campus transportation and renewable energy systems, and sensors that can detect breaks in water lines, an important consideration in a state like Arizona.
In our case, it's the students on campus at ASU, but it's also the communities in which our campuses sit. And so focusing on how we can improve mobility, decrease water consumption, decrease energy consumption, and just increase their quality of life overall really is the main point for me.
And for other Arizona institutions as well. Not only is ASU looking to make living better for its students and their neighbors, but it is collaborating with schools like University of Arizona and Northern Arizona University to accomplish the same goals, says Burrell.
ASU, U of A, and NAU are collaborating on regional initiatives that are going to bring smart technologies to our communities of all sizes.
The event was sponsored by the Congressional Caucus on Smart Cities, and the ultimate goal for Bowman, Burrell, and the others here is to make the laboratory of campus life the reality of smart cities.
Through the research that we do together, through the practitionering that we do of applying and testing these kinds of environments, we're going to make living in Arizona a much better thing.
But this is Washington, which means speakers at today's event said they were looking to Congress to adopt policies that will pave the way for the future they envision. In Washington, Julian Parras, Cronkite News.
There's now an easy way to visit unique places in Hawaii without leaving your home.
Yeah, it turns out there's a new virtual field trip you can take. And as Cronkite News reporter Amanda Slee explains, it comes from a collaboration between an Arizona university and a private school in Hawaii.
Kamehameha Schools teamed up with Arizona State University to create this virtual field trip where you can explore what are called special places in Hawaii. This immersive experience was created by integrating STEM and place-based education.
This virtual experience was launched to help students in classrooms around the world learn about history, culture, and the environment of two sacred places in Hawaii. It's considered place-based education.
Place-based education is very similar in many ways to what they call Aina-based education. In Native Hawaiian culture, they also have this very strong sense of place and teaching through place.
The virtual field trip, also known as VFT, includes interactive 360-degree video, photographs, and interviews. It took just under 3 years to complete this VFT between ASU and Kamehameha Schools, a private educational charitable trust for K-12.
It's not only intended to inform, but also to inspire people to look inward into their own place.
He says this online field trip helps make your real visit to the area more valuable and meaningful, so you have an idea of what to expect.
It's kind of like going to Disneyland, right? You're taking a child to Disneyland who's never heard of Disneyland before, and you just show up. They're going to have a great time. They're going to enjoy themselves. But if you start sharing with them about Disneyland, they start doing a little bit of searches on the web, talking to their friends about Disneyland, it builds up the anticipation and their expectations on how to behave, what's going to be there, what they can look forward to.
they have created 2 tours, one of a suburban spiritual significance and the other of a more remote area that would take a 1-mile hike over lava rocks and soft sand.
It's kind of cool to see that people are trying to preserve these, like, the mo'olalos of Hawaii, and when you think about it, like, not a lot of people know them, so this is a good way for people to get to learn about it.
And virtual field trips like this will continue being a way to help students learn about the world around them.
Technology advances, and we find ways to stimulate an education, and I see no reason to think that in 10 years, 20 years, students won't routinely be doing all sorts of virtual explorations.
The virtual experience is meant to help students at Kamehameha schools learn, but is open and available to anyone who wants to take the virtual tour. In the newsroom, Amanda Slee, Cronkite News.
National parks in Arizona attract millions of visitors a year, making them vital to the state's economy. But all those visitors mean wear and tear on the parks, wear and tear that carries a big bill. Who pays was the question of a Senate hearing yesterday, as Julian Barras reports from our Washington bureau.
The Grand Canyon is a spectacle in its own right, an enormous landscape that attracts millions of visitors every year. But the canyon has a $314 million problem. That's the cost of repairs the park needs. Liz Archuleta thinks the canyon, which she calls the crown jewel of national parks, deserves better.
I feel like our delegation from Arizona knows the issue very well in terms of deferred maintenance of parks, and Grand Canyon National Park being the crown jewel of parks, they're very familiar with what the needs are.
Those needs are just part of the $507 million in deferred maintenance at national parks in Arizona, which is just a fraction of the $12 billion backlog nationally. Archuleta was among witnesses at a Senate hearing yesterday that grappled with the problem of aging and worn park facilities, like the Grand Canyon's main water pipeline.
The pipeline was built in the 1960s and it was supposed to last 40 years. And so as you can see, it's way behind its time in terms of being fixed and being reconstructed.
While witnesses and senators both recognized the problem, few had answers. But one senator said park users should be part of the solution.
If we really care about this issue, we should consider user fees to apply to all those to whom they ordinarily apply.
The Louisiana senator worried that funds to fix the nation's parks might be taken from deserving projects in Gulf Coast communities.
I'm a little bit, what's the word, less convinced about crocodile tears for our parks when people will not assess appropriate user fees on those using those parks to defray this expense.
Witnesses offered some possible solutions, including public-private partnerships. And Archuleta proposed extending the season on the canyon's north rim to bring in more revenue. But she says her message to Washington is that the federal government has a responsibility as well as local supporters.
My goal is to make sure that the federal government meets its responsibility in maintaining our parks.
In Washington, Julian Barras, Cronkite News.
The $12 billion parks backlog is just part of the state funding shortfall lawmakers were looking at. The tab exceeds $19.4 billion once lands controlled by the Bureau of Land Management. The Forest Service and the Fish and Wildlife Service are also included.
The tradition of making pottery is sacred to many Native American tribes.
Cronkite News reporter Karina Espinoza introduces us to one man who keeps that tradition alive.
Through his hands, Ron Carlos carries the memory of the Pima and Maricopa Indian nations. He's been a ceramic artist for 25 years, originally motivated by his mother, who pushed him to keep this ancient art form alive.
Clay played a big part in life a long time ago, but over time, with the Americans and the Spanish that came through, they started bringing metal objects, and that eventually start replacing clay. But we as a people are made out of clay. That's what our creation tells us too.
The history of pottery is one that covers thousands of years, part of it captured at the new exhibit at Phoenix Pueblo Grande Museum. Pottery pieces from the Tohono O'odham, Hopi, and Zuni tribes are on display, some of them telling the story of its people and the lives they lived so many years ago.
You get to come in and you get to kind of recreate a piece that was, existing thousands of years ago, and now it's in its entirety, and it's just a cool way of kind of walking around it, getting a really good 3D image of what it looks like and how large some of these pieces actually were.
These fragments have been found in different parts of Arizona, like Tucson, Phoenix, Casa Grande, and Flagstaff. Museum curator Lindsay Volgo-Teeter says that these kinds of pieces are invaluable to archaeologists.
I think it's a really powerful reason, an example of why we need to preserve the objects that are here, because once they're gone forever.
For current pottery artists like Ron Carlos, he hopes that this will help in keeping interest alive towards an ancient tradition that he doesn't want to see lost.
I'm probably the last one that makes pottery all the time. And there's a few others that know how to make pottery, they just don't. And so I try to teach all the time, but that's because of the way they think like Americans. They want everything to be ideal and perfect and pristine. And it doesn't always come out like that. Sometimes the clay wants to do what it wants to do.
In Phoenix, Karina Espinoza, Cronkite News.
All of its children had come to the Mother Church of Country Music. It was almost like a badge of honor that you had to bring your culture with you to the table. That's why Bob Wills and his guys brought us Western music. That's why Hank Williams brought the South with him from honky tonks. Johnny Cash brought the black land dirt of Arkansas. Bill Monroe brought music out of Kentucky bluegrass music. Willie Nelson brought his poetry from Texas. Patsy Cline brought her heartache from Virginia. I mean, it was the most wonderful parade of sons and daughters of America that brought their hearts and their souls and their experiences, and it gave us a great era in country music.
With wildfires, a scarcity of water, and other environmental issues facing the Earth today, it's critical to stay up to date with local impacts of a changing climate. That's why we created Elemental, covering sustainability, a multimedia collaboration between public television and radio stations. From climate change to water conservation to renewable energy and much more, Elemental covers the latest in sustainability news. Find our stories on our website, elementalreports.com.
Normally, parents support their kids when they find a hobby. That might require buying sports gear or art supplies, but in One Valley family, the roles are reversed.
When Ernie Adams' sons saw their dad run out of room for his passion, they took his hobby for cars to the next level. Sammy Giebers shows us this dwarf car museum.
Now, Gene's building this 64 Chevy convertible here.
Ernie Adams has a passion.
And this is my little 32 Ford three-window coupe that I've built.
He spends his days working on dwarf cars.
The car had radio, heater, defrosters, windshield wipers, cowl vent.
They don't realize he built his cars in front of this little shed.
His son remembers his dad building the tiny cars here years ago. And this is what the home for his hobby looks like today.
No, it all happened just accidentally. It just looks like anything else. It evolved into this.
Ernie's three sons, Jason, Richard, and Kevin, saw their dad running out of room in the garage when he was working on his dwarf cars. People were always coming over, interested in seeing them.
Well, I just wanted to build the cars. I didn't care about showing them, but they decided they should be shown.
That little tool shed evolved into a museum. Thousands of people come through here every year to see these guys. Adam's sons are over volunteering at the museum all the time. You'd think his boys would be making cars themselves.
If he had to work with me, he wouldn't get anything done. About the most I get to do on the cars is hold something once in a while.
They just enjoy being around family. Even though the boys weren't building the cars themselves, they were building up their dad.
Good to know that they'll be here after I'm gone. All the kids are good kids, all three of them. I was just cleaning the top off a little bit.
So even though it's Dad's hobby, it's the family's museum. In Maricopa, Sammy Giebers, Cronkite News.
You can meet Ernie Adams at the Dwarf Car Museum just about every day.
It's open from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. For more information, visit dwarfcarmuseum.com.
An economic current flowing through the Colorado River region is rapidly expanding businesses and housing in the Arizona and Nevada desert.
Cronkite News reporter Kyle Dowd traveled to the river connecting the two states to learn how a California exodus and cross-state business interests have led to some of the fastest economic growth in the nation.
As soon as the houses are built, they get filled.
Experts say cheap housing and an attractive regulatory environment for businesses explain why Nevada and Arizona rank first and second in the nation for fastest job growth, and first and third respectively for fastest income growth, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics.
You get the combination of significant numbers of people moving into this region combined with relatively positive economic opportunity for businesses, and you lead to a relatively fertile environment in terms of economic growth. And I think that's what you're seeing.
Those people and businesses are largely coming from California, which is at the top of an economic triangle that connects Nevada and Arizona. Business leader John Pinecker says Bullhead City is one of the first points of contact for fleeing Californians.
By far, it's the most amount of relocation we get, both businesses and residences, is from California. And they attribute it to the policies. They can't stand what's going on out there. Taxes are a big part of it. The cost of living out there.
According to a cost of living index, a worker making a salary of $75,000 a year in Irvine, California could maintain that same standard of living with less than half that salary in Bullhead City.
They're working as fast as they can to try and get homes built. A big part of that is the people moving here from California. They don't want something that's already built. They want to build their own thing because they sold their $1 million home and now they got money to spend.
Bullhead City has a younger sister named Laughlin right across the Colorado River in Nevada. Laughlin was born to casino magnate Don Laughlin in 1964 after he flew over nearly empty desert in his private plane and built the first of 11 casinos.
When he spotted this in his airplane, he knew that this would be a perfect place. You know, the river divides the two states.
Today, the two communities work together to accommodate the influx from California, according to Laughlin's Museo.
For Bullhead, or for the Arizona areas, there's not enough employment for everyone that wants to live in Paradise.
Museo is among the Arizona residents who live in Bullhead City but commute to Laughlin. While Laughlin has the jobs, Bullhead City has the housing. Nearly 85% of workers in Laughlin's entertainment industry live on the other side of the state line in Arizona.
We've kind of said, let's make this one community with a river running through it. And that's really the way that we do it, and that's what we have to do. It's too important. We need them. They need us.
Across the bridge, Pinecker's Laughlin counterpart said the relationship goes beyond just dollars.
We share the same fishing hole. We go to the same schools and the same activities and the same parks. We share our dogs and our families and our children.
2 states and 2 time zones, united by the Colorado River. Reporting from Bullhead City, Kyle Dowd, Cronkite News.
The Interstate 11 project, which may one day run from Canada to Mexico, is expected to push the synergy between Arizona and Nevada even further.
It could be finished as soon as next year, but environmental concerns might delay the project.
If you're looking for one show that tells you what happened that day in the world of business, it's NBR.
We saw a classic shipwreck.
Nordstrom's opening stores.
Triple-digit gains.
Crude climbs.
We're there to help our audience find new investment ideas.
The market still has room to go up.
Nightly Business Report is the longest-running business television program in history.
Weeknights at 10:30 on Arizona PBS.
Stay in the know on the go. At Cronkite News, we work hard to report the facts and keep you updated, whether we're on set or on the scene.
Taking it from the studio to the field. So I'm here in South Phoenix.
In Phoenix, we're just a click away. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, or find us online at cronkitenews.azpbs.org.
Mensa, also known as the High IQ Society, has more than 50,000 members in the United States. Each year, its annual gathering attracts people from all over the country.
One Mensa member also uses the opportunity to share her passion for art.
In college, I took a glass class and fell in love with glass. And I always made glass through the years, but didn't have a lot of time to do it full time until I retired.
Sandy Fetter makes homemade glass art she now sells in her home state of California and at Mensa annual gatherings.
Thank you.
It's a big change from what she did for most of her life.
I taught computer science in college for 25 years. And when I retired, I started doing more of this. This was my hobby.
Sandy holds a master's degree in computer science, which she earned at a time where there weren't too many women in the field. According to the National Center for Education Statistics, she was among just over 1,500 women in the entire country who received a computer science degree between 1982 and 1983.
And now that I'm retired, I have more time, and I love working with the bright colors, and I love meeting people. And I don't mind selling my work and meeting the people who buy it and hearing their comments.
Sandy has been a member of Mensa for more than 30 years. It all started when a headhunter who was screening her for a job invited her to a small gathering.
She said, "Would you like to join this group?" And I said, "I'd love to. It was really nice." And she said, "Well, it's Mensa." And I said, "Oh, I don't think I'm eligible to join." And she said, "You are, and that's why I brought you to the event."
Fast forward more than 3 decades, and Sandy now sells her wares at places like the Mensa gathering in Phoenix. It was just the latest stop in her artistic journey.
I took items to Boston. I took them to Portland, Oregon, and Reno, Nevada. So I've probably taken it to 3 different annual gatherings.
For this computer science teacher, her glass creations have allowed her to look at life through different colors and bring joy to others.
And if it's art glass they can wear, that's great. They can wear it every day in their lives. If it's a pretty plate, they can have the plate on display in their home and say, "I got this from someone in Mensa." So it's just brightening somebody's life, I hope.
Mensa has members in more than 100 countries around the world and requires members to have an IQ in the top 2% of the population.
There's a museum or memorial for just about everything in Washington, D.C., but not every important site in our nation's capital is in the tour books, and not all of them are easy to find.
Julian Paras is in Washington and shares how one app is leading tourists to landmarks that may mean more, even if they're not advertised.
D.C. is home to monuments marking the nation's history. Do a Google search for Native American landmarks, however, and the National Museum of the American Indian is probably the only thing that comes up. But a closer look shows the capital is home to many monuments with Native ties, from the Iwo Jima Memorial to Congressional Cemetery to more than a dozen others. How can a casual visitor find them all? There's now an app for that, of course.
Working on this app, learning more about the history of Indigenous peoples in the DC area has been an honor to work on this project.
Rule was talking about Indigenous DC, an app developed by a group at the AT&T Center for Indigenous Politics and Policy at George Washington University. The app unveiled this summer raises awareness about 17 lesser-known sites around DC. While the Iwo Jima Memorial is famous, it's not clear at first glance that one of the Marines raising the flag is Ira Hayes, a Pima Indian from Arizona, and less obvious sites like Congressional Cemetery. Through the app, the user can learn or visit places like the Liberty and Freedom Lummi Totem Poles located in Washington, D.C. The poles were created after the 9/11 terrorist attack to help the nation heal. Indigenous DC was selected from 7 proposals aimed at telling Indigenous history.
They offered projects that raised awareness of Native students, their vibrancy, their essential role within higher education, and George Washington's Indigenous Guide to DC was one of those.
Tina Kite, a tourist from Georgia who was visiting the National Museum of the American Indian recently, thinks the app would be handy for visitors like her.
You could definitely explore more, and it would save you time in just Googling to try to find information. That would be very helpful.
While the app is focused on DC, Bledsoe said he hopes it can be used in schools nationwide.
We see that as a way that we'll continue to invest in how Natives are seen in this space.
At Iwo Jima Memorial, Julian Paras, Cronkite News.
That's it for this special edition of Cronkite News Tonight. Thanks for joining us. For top Arizona stories anytime, go to cronkitenews.azpbs.org.